Welcome to episode 3 of the further adventures of your friendly neighborhood Rockin, Hikin' Librarian. Hi, I'm Pete Biddle, and this is episode 3 of the further adventures of your friendly neighborhood Rockin, Hikin' Librarian. And this episode is titled The Love of Books and Libraries. How did I come to love books so much, and how did I come to love libraries so much? You already know about my journey to become a librarian, so now I'm going to discuss how I fell in love with books. I know most people will say, oh, I remember when I was young and my mom read to me all the time, or my dad read to me all the time, or my parents read to me all the time. That's not the case with me. I wasn't read to as a child. I know, shocker, right? But that was a time, it was the late 60s, early 70s, and my dad was in the military, and he was always gone in the field or, doing military stuff. And my mom wasn't a great reader in English. She was from Iceland, so I just wasn't read to. But I do have a very fond memory of when I was younger. I remember getting one of those leaflets from school like you do for Scholastic for books. I'm not sure if it was Scholastic. I don't know what it was. I just remember getting that, bringing it home. Must have been first grade, possibly even second grade. But I had that and showed it to my mom, and she's like, I could pick some books. I remember picking 2 books that stick out in my mind. One was The Mouse and the Motorcycle, because I thought it was kind of cool, a mouse riding a motorcycle. And then my first book that was really mine, that I really truly loved, and that was Happiness is a Warm Puppy. It was about Snoopy, and I just adored that book. That book has always stuck in my head after all these years. So those are my first 2 books. I do remember when I was younger, my dad would always buy me and my 2 older brothers these, what they were called Little Big Books, and they were abridged versions of usually classics, or they were something to do with Disney. I can remember Donald Duck. I remember like Moby Dick, Treasure Island, those stories. And we used to read them all the time. And then I got into reading magazines. My older brother always had Mad Magazine and Cracked. I read those all the time. My dad would take us to this store, and he would get some magazines, and I'd always get Creepy, and I'd get Eerie and Famous Monsters. I like scary stuff. Nothing like the scary stuff you see today. But the 70s had some, some scary things. Your traditional Frankenstein and the early Dracula movies. I was really excited to see those, and I enjoyed those magazines. And it wasn't until 5th grade and 6th grade where I started reading Skateboarder magazine, cover to cover and over, because I was a big skateboarder at that time. I used to ride pools. I was part of a skateboarding team here in El Paso, Texas, at Desert Surf Skate Team, and I was the captain of the team. I was called the Youth because supposedly I shredded as good as the older kids. I didn't do the crazy stuff, the real crazy vertical stuff, but I still rode pools. And then kind of faltered. My reading kind of faltered in high school. I wasn't reading that much until I got out of high school. I read The Hobbit, and that's when I got hooked back on reading. And then when I had my son, we always went to the library and just books and reading, and became an education, and I became a big reader. That was my journey for reading, not your traditional where you're read to all the time, but I fell in love with books. Now the library is a little bit different. I do remember when my dad was stationed at Fort Bliss here in El Paso, and when we first got here, we lived on base for about a year, and I would always go to the library. And I learned how to use a card catalog, but I remember spending hours, just hours at the library. I'd stay hours, and I would just walk around, walk the stacks. I got so good at walking the stacks that I knew where everything was. I didn't have to use the card catalog anymore. I just loved being there. When I got to public school, I just remember one year I'd go to the library all the time, and my favorite books were the Dr. Doodle books. I read those all the time. They were big, and I think that's what fascinated me about them was, look at these big books. What are they? Ooh, these are kind of cool. And I read those, and then I kind of, got into the magazines bigger at that time. I remember middle school, never went to the library once. I could not tell you what my library looked like. Never went. And I said middle school, but I should say junior high. It was a junior high school, Eastwood Junior High School. Never went to the library. In high school, never went to the library. Went to Eastwood High School. Never set foot in the library except one time, and that's when I was a senior, and I was, what do they call it now, when clearing out, right? Senior clearance. And I went to the library, I walked in, and the librarian said, oh, let me see if you have any finds. And I'm like, I won't. This is the first time I've ever been here. And I kind of went like this and went, oh, so this is your library. And that was it. And it wasn't until, like I said, I had my son and I started going to the public library, and I loved it. And when I was working on my undergraduate here at UTEP, I fondly remember when I'd go and be working on homework and I'd take a break. I would just walk the stacks. Oh, I just loved it. It was so amazing to be surrounded by all these books. And you're just walking around going, wow. And my 5-minute break would turn out to be a half-hour break or even longer, and I'd be checking out some, usually music books. But I do love libraries now. I think they're amazing. They're very important, much to everyone's, like a lot of people I know, much of their disbelief, libraries are not going out of style. Their patronages are usually going up a little bit every year. And not just for checking out books. It's about it's a place for families to go. You can go to a public library, and Dad could go and learn about computer classes. Mom could take classes on sewing, knitting, or even computer classes too. Great classes on citizenship, especially here in El Paso since we're so close to the border. And there's be a teen center where you could play some foosball, pool, read manga, play video games, and then you have your children's area, where you have story time and lots of books and games. So libraries have really evolved, especially the public library, and especially what's really evolved too is the school libraries. Like my library, I have 2 maker spaces, 2 podcast rooms, and a room that's designated for live announcements or podcasting or video production. So that's going to be a later episode, and we'll be talking about that. So what's coming next? Book reviews. Once again, this week I'm reviewing a book and also an audiobook. So the first one I'm going to do is a series that is very dear to my heart, which I've probably read 3 or 4 times and listened to the audiobook several times. It's the classic Harry Potter series. It's such a great story, and it's written for kids. I know some adults go, oh well, it's not, my style. I'm like, well, it's written for kids. It's a great story about good versus evil, and good wins. And I don't think there'll ever be another book series that will spark the interest of reading like the Harry Potter series did. I remember when the last book came out, The Deathly Hallows, me and my son went to Walmart and got in line about 11:30, and there was a long line because the book started going on sale at 12. They had huge pallets of the book and long lines waiting for this book. That's unheard of nowadays. It was amazing. And we got 2 books because he started reading, I started reading. I only read for about an hour or 2. He read most of it that night. I highly recommend you to read it if you've never read it. It is just a good story. And the author J.K. Rowling really knows how to tie things together. I like the way everything developed throughout the series. I was mad at Harry Potter for being such a snotty teenager in the 5th book, The Order of the Phoenix. So that's a good sign when you look at the characters and you get mad, or you love them, or you hate them. But great series to read if you've never read it, and also great to revisit it if you haven't read it in a while. Now for my audiobook. When was it? I was going to say this year, no, it was last year. I listened to 18 audiobooks from the the Dresden Files, about Harry Dresden, the Wizard. This is a series by Jim Butcher. I had read the first 3 books some years ago that he wasn't a senior, he was a sophomore at the time at Chapin High School, who said, have I read these books? And I said, no. And he said, you should read them, they're just fun. And I read the first 3 and they were fun, but I started reading some other stuff and I didn't carry on with it. And I noticed they were available through a public library in audiobooks, and I went through all 18 of them really quickly. They're good, quick reads. They are a lot of fun. I don't recommend for middle school, high school, yes, and adult. Some people have called it the adult Harry Potter. I don't really think so, but it's such a great story that has a wizard who's Harry Dresden, but it's not like your Harry Potter wizard or your Gandalf kind of wizard. He's a modern day wizard who can find things and do some spells, and he has some magical powers. And this is all based in Chicago, and it's kind of neat because since he's a wizard, he can't be around electrical stuff, or they tend to break or not work. So he always has to take the stairs. He has to have an older car because newer cars won't work for him. And he goes through a lot of these adventures. And it's a continuing story. And Jim Butcher does a great job bringing in all kinds of characters, 3 different types of vampires, magic swords, fairies, demons. Oh my gosh, there's just so much. Different worlds. It's considered an urban fantasy, and I would highly recommend it if you just need a fun read and not too long. Each book will take you a few days to a week to read. Just amazing. There's 18. He hasn't finished the series, and I can't wait till he does. It is great. By the way, don't watch the series that was on TV some years ago. Not recommended. Those are my 2 book recommendations, and next week my video will be about my library, the YWA Rockin Library. So if you're watching this, I will do a tour. If you're going to be listening to this on the podcast, I'll be as detailed as I can about my library. That's it for this week, and remember, reading rocks, and the book was better